He looks good in SO1. Roger.
BCS arm switch is on.
Okay, Victor.
Landing rocket arm switch is on. Here comes the throttle. Circuit breakers in. We have separation.
Roger.
Inboard and outboards are on. We're coming forward with the side stick.
All looks good.
Roger. I've got a blowout. Amber 3.
Pitch your pitch to 0.
Pitch is out. I can't hold altitude. Correction. Alpha hold is off. Trip selected. Emergency. Flight com. I can't hold it. She's breaking up. She's breaking.
You're listening to CaveRadioBroadcasting.com. The words and opinions you are about to hear are of the hosts and do not reflect the management of CaveRadioBroadcasting.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to Down the Rabbit Hole. I'm Dave Hooper. I'm here with my good friends. It's been a while since we've all been on the air together. I've got Howard with me.
Well, we're on the air, but we're not
Since
really
we've all
here.
been together, I know, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I've been in Mexico for 2 weeks.
Is that what the kids are calling it nowadays?
So we got Howard, Dave, and Kenny's working the board. Kenny, how's it going?
How's it going?
And feel free to pipe in as we go. In fact, something we had said to Eric and Al before you, we're going to kind of treat you as the voice of reason, the voice of the regular guy, because a while ago when we got onto this topic, we stopped being regular in a lot of ways.
We're off the reservation.
So a couple of shout-outs I want to give today. One is to IamTheFaceOfTruth.com. Check them out. They are, if you've ever seen the yellow banners on Facebook where they've got the country name in yellow on the side of people's profile pictures, that's who they are. They're helping raise awareness, mostly directed around 9/11 truth, but once you stumble onto that, it leads to many other places. Of course, everything we say today is it's really not from our own minds. It is from the powers that reside upstairs, God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and a whole bunch of other spiritual, powerful entities like that that influence us. At least I hope it's them influencing us and not their enemy, but sometimes I wonder.
Yeah, it'll be a little while before we find out, but sooner or later we will know.
Speaking of their enemy, that is actually what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to continue talking about the footprints of organized evil throughout humanity. And we've given this, there's many different names that it has had throughout history. The one we reference that's the biblical name is the Synagogue of Satan. You can actually go back even further into the Old Testament. This is essentially Babylon and the mystery religions. That would be another term for this. I'm not going to even say loosely organized, but certainly, actually, I think well-organized and well-coordinated group of folks that they praise the opposite God of the one we just mentioned. They're very real, very dangerous, and if you like the book of Ephesians, go to Ephesians 5:11, which kind of embodies what we're doing here. Anyone of you guys can rip off Ephesians 5:11 on the fly?
Verbatim? No, but I can.
The idea of it?
The idea that the struggles that we find ourselves in are not that of the flesh. They are of...
That's like a little later. This is the one... better to uncover the unfruitful deeds of darkness.
Oh, do not participate in
Right.
the unfruitful deeds of darkness, rather expose them.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I even
Yes.
butchered it.
Yeah, but that's kind of what we're trying to
So let's continue that little quotes game we had, and Kenny wants you to participate in this too. So I'm going to throw out some quotes, and then I'm going to throw out a few options, and then you guys guess who this quote is from. Now, to make this interesting, there is someone I'm going to quote twice. This way you'll understand why I'm doing that. So first quote I'm going to throw out is, this is the quote. Truth is the cry of all, but the game of few. This was either said by George Berkeley, who was an Irish philosopher in the 1700s. It was either, or possibly Pearl Bailey, a 1970s singer, or Euripides, Albert Einstein, or Gandhi.
Gandhi.
All right, you're saying Gandhi? Kenny?
I'll go with
We got 2 for Gandhi. Howard, what's your guess?
Pearl Bailey.
Pearl Bailey. You guys all get an because it was actually George Berkeley, an Irish philosopher in the early 1700s.
Maybe Pearl Bailey was quoting him, and that's what I was thinking of.
They might have dated. All right. Next quote. You never find yourself until you face the truth. This was either George Berkeley again, Pearl Bailey, Euripides, Einstein, or Gandhi.
Throwing out for Einstein.
You never find yourself until you face the truth. You're saying Einstein?
Why not?
Howard?
Gandhi.
Kenny?
Yeah, it sounds like Gandhi.
He keeps saying Gandhi. Eventually, he's
Yeah,
going to
well,
be right.
right
The
sooner or
odds
later.
are, right?
Gandhi.
Well, that one was Pearl Bailey. All right. You guys, everyone is 0-2 right now.
Yeah.
All right. Someone's got to get one. If you keep saying Gandhi, you might get one, but maybe there aren't any Gandhi quotes in here, so that's the trick. All right. The third one we're doing. Here's the quote. A man's most valuable trait is a judicious sense of what not to believe. So that was either George Berkeley again, Pearl Bailey, Euripides, Einstein, or Gandhi.
Einstein.
I'll guess Berkeley.
Kenny?
I'm sorry, what was that again?
Just
Want
say
me to just
Gandhi.
fill in Gandhi for you?
Just say Gandhi, Kenny.
The quote is, a man's most valuable trait is a judicious sense of what not to believe.
Einstein.
You guys are 0-3 today. That was Euripides, 400 BC, Greek playwright and philosopher. All right, we got 2 more, and then we're going to move on. Here's the quote. Fourth one. Common sense is the collection of prejudices acquired by age 18. George Berkeley, Pearl Bailey, Euripides, Einstein, or Gandhi.
What's the quote again?
Common sense is the collection of prejudices acquired by age 18.
Einstein.
Yeah, Einstein.
Kenny?
Gandhi.
Gandhi.
Why not Gandhi?
Come on.
Sorry, Kenny. It was Einstein.
All right.
You guys got one. Give
See, I go
yourselves
for
a
one or
start.
the other.
Good one for old Al.
The Polak never wins.
All right. Let's see. Oh, actually, there are 2 more. Here's the quote. Number 5. You assist an evil system most effectively by obeying its orders and decrees. An evil system never deserves such allegiance. Allegiance to it means partaking of evil. A good person will resist an evil system with his or her whole soul. George Berkeley, Pearl Bailey, Euripides, Einstein, or Gandhi.
George Berkeley.
Yeah, that's what I say too.
Yeah, I was going to go with Berkeley.
You should have stuck with Gandhi on this one, Kenny. Because it was Gandhi.
No way.
It was Gandhi.
Well, see.
I'll be surprised if anyone gets
If
this
he
one.
would have done it with an English accent, I would have got it. Or with an Indian accent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Dude. All right, last one before we move on. Here's the quote. A man who was completely innocent offered himself as a sacrifice for the good of others, including his enemies, and became the ransom of the world. George Berkeley, Pearl Bailey, Euripides, Albert Einstein, or Gandhi.
That's got to be loaded. I'm going to say Einstein.
I got to pick somebody different just to see if I can beat Dave.
Or lose to him now. Or win. I don't know. We'll find out in a minute.
But I agree with Einstein.
Okay, we got 2 Einsteins.
Bailey.
Bailey, once again, Kenny, had you stuck with Gandhi, you would have won today 2-1 against these guys. Believe it or not, it was Gandhi.
Gandhi said that?
Does that surprise you?
It does.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Surprised me too.
Yeah, it does.
Very much so.
Good for Gandhi.
I didn't think he was that wordy, Gandhi.
Not so. I didn't
those are some
realize that
pretty
he
heavy
was
quotes.
that is a quote
I knew he
obviously
was
about
wise.
Jesus
Yeah,
Christ.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
surprised he even.
Yeah, went there.
because when I think of Gandhi, and I think this is true, for, whenever we think of, the message of Christianity, we're always like, well, how are the Indians or how are the Chinese going to get it? I mean, it's not fair that they would never hear about this and they can't, move on to heaven or to the next world if they never have heard of Jesus Christ, because that is, the one way out of this prison. And so I'm thinking Gandhi is going to be some sort of Eastern religion, and I don't know enough about the man other than he was a very much turn the other cheek kind of guy.
Well, yeah, we don't know the context of what that came out of either, so.
But who else could he be talking about?
Well, that's obviously who he's talking about.
You'd think so.
Right.
I'm glad no one said Euripides, who was 400 BC. Cause
that would have been way messed up.
It would have been more messed up if he actually said it.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, so I want you guys to remember, it is not down the conventional hole. It is down the rabbit hole, as always. We encourage you guys to do your own research. Don't trust any one person, even us, because if we make a mistake in our research, don't want you to carry it forward. And it's really only with seeing this with your own eyes where it really sinks into your heart. Otherwise, it's just kind of babble at a party that's the kind of thing that used to make me roll my eyes, if you think about it. I think you guys, too, because we're all recent, I guess, converts. I don't know if that's the right word, but at least in my case, a lot of people find God because they're raised in a godly family, or seems they were programmed that way. And I was raised in a family like that, too, Roman Catholic family, although that we could make an argument that that's more demonic than it is Christian. But
that's another show.
Yeah, exactly. And if my mom, I think she's back from Colombia, so she could be listening to me.
Hi, Mama.
I got to be careful.
Hi, Mrs. H.
She's going to bar me from the house.
¿Cómo está, Mama?
So where was I going with that? Oh, in our case, we kind of found how evil operates, and it's more than just the TV version of some greedy politician trying to take over the world. It is, in my opinion, it is a very well-coordinated system that is ancient, frankly. And we're going to talk a little bit about the history, the footprints of humanity's enemy through time. And we started this topic, might have been the last time we were together, it was a few weeks ago, because we're on a new night now. By the way, today is March 31st.
Yeah,
it's
Thursday. Welcome to Thursday.
I think we're going to like Thursdays better.
I think Thursdays are going to rock.
I feel your energy today, Howard. I like it.
I'm energetic. It's because I had a Reuben over at McDonald's.
That's what it's.
So there's going to be some energy in the room a little later, if you know what I'm talking about.
Great. This is not a big room.
Yeah. Well,
and I'm snuggling right up next to you, DiBiase.
Yeah, exactly. You guys you're in the danger zone, the ground zero.
Uh-huh.
And you know what? Now that we're leaving a little later, I wouldn't mind cracking open a beer in the second half hour. We got to stock that fridge with some beers, so we stop raiding the beers that are in there.
I'll bring some next time.
You should have reminded me. I got a fifth of whiskey at the shop, man.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Do you guys?
We don't play. I don't play the beer game. Okay.
Do any of you guys watch James Bond? Have you seen any James Bond movies recently?
Of course.
Okay. So I was on a James Bond kick over the last few weeks, and I don't know what got it started, but it just occurred to me that every time he's meeting with M or Q, they pour themselves. Usually it's a whiskey. I mean, when he's out and about with a tuxedo, it's a martini. It's a martini.
Yeah, shaken, that's true.
And I always wondered, because I've had a cocktail at work before, and I feel it, like it's immediate. And I always wondered how you can be a secret agent if you're like half drunk all the time. I'd like to find out. Actually, we could be finding out later today.
Yeah, I don't know. I try to drink at work, and drinking usually there's a finite amount of time that I'm awake. So it's usually about 3 or 4 hours from the time I get the first drink in me. So drinking at work, it's kind of counterproductive because I just want to sleep and eat nachos.
Well, it gets me fired up if I'm around people, but there's like this law of diminishing returns.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys ever like I'm not a great pool player. However, if I'm having beers, between beers 2 and 5, I'm a good pool player, and then it starts to really get sloppy. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Does this happen to you guys too?
Yeah.
So how do you capture that 2 to 5 beer mentality and keep it, because there's something there that's flowing in a way.
Is it simply that you're losing your inhibitions?
You keep drinking all day long.
Yeah.
All right. The show's motto. That's weird. You guys both coughed at the same time.
I'm afraid now I'm going to get sick. I made it 2 weeks in Mexico with not a bug, and now I'm going to get sick.
You're between me and Kenny. You're done for.
Show's motto, I just want to remind everyone, and I don't know how we're going to... Well, Howard, you're going to get this into our stuff, but there are no more secrets, just ignorance. We coined that one ourselves. So, all right, the footprints of humanity's enemy. Dave, you did an awesome job a few weeks back talking about the origins of the ancient mystery religions and where they came from. Why don't you give us a recap on that and kind of bring us up past the Tower of Babel, past the flood. Let's get into about 2,000 years ago, if you can.
Sure. I think if we go back to that show, it was kind of outlining how starting pretty much with the flood, that based on cultures that arose basically out of nowhere, languages that popped on the face of the planet with no clear origin point. They just kind of existed. Ancient Sumarian, everyone's seen that in school, the cuneiform, right? Cuneiform tablets. That language just kind of appeared. And if you go back into the scriptures, you learn about a guy named Nimrod, who... It's actually a mistranslation, but it's a great hunter before God. It's actually the correct translation is a great hunter against God. He was a rebel, and actually, nowadays his name is synonymous with being an idiot for that very reason. And he's credited with construction of the Tower of Babel, which was where you can go to the ancient Sumerians kings list. He's listed there, as well as Gilgamesh, who is always portrayed as a gigantic human being.
Well, the origins of all the different languages, that's kind of Nimrod's fault, isn't it?
That's right.
Wasn't that a direct result of the Tower of Babel?
That's right. That was when it was...
Everybody spoke Aramaic back in the day, and then he's like, we're going to build this tower up to the heavens so we can get up there and basically kick God's butt. And
it was probably Hebrew, but
that was Aramaic. Well, sorry,
the Aramaic was the...
Well, Aramaic...
There was one language.
Aramaic is an ancient form of Hebrew,
and
that is the... I mean, a lot of languages have dialects that we'll call different things, but they were all of one language, and that is they were working on the Tower of Babel, which I don't think it was something that was vertically tall that was the problem, because we've got skyscrapers all over the place today. If you read between the lines and then you actually look at the hidden archaeology of what we have found in Iraq...
It was more of a portal, right?
Exactly. It's what a lot of people theorize is the exact same thing, because there is nothing new under the sun. It's what we're doing with the 17-plus Large Hadron Colliders like CERN, which we spent a lot of time talking about, which are literally, and this is not conspiracy theorists talking, you can go understand a little bit of particle physics and science. They're opening up dimensions to other worlds, and there is something coming out of there, and it's been happening in the very, very recent past. I'm talking like the last 12 months, and that's what got, that was one of the times that God got involved in the day-to-day affairs of humanity, and he did it by confusing the languages.
Right, so they couldn't communicate.
And Satan's response to that was, that obviously was a setback, and that ceased the building of the Tower of Babel, although we have gone back and found just oodles of evidence of the superior technology, even to what we have today in the areas surrounding it.
Yeah.
The Egyptians had electricity. We found evidence of atomic physics, nuclear explosions, And, these aren't things to be laughed off. And Satan's response to that was to begin using symbols, which don't have a particular language. And ever since then, symbols, which anyone that understands the esoteric information of the world, the hidden, what is hidden, you will find, of course, we all know the pyramid with the all-seeing eye, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later. They began to communicate through symbols, which was language inconsequential. It doesn't matter what language you speak. A pyramid's a pyramid in every language. And those symbols have stayed with us throughout history and are exploding today. I mean, they've really been around forever, even if you look at the logos of some of the companies that you'd find in the
Are they exploding, or are we just aware?
I do believe they are manifesting and coming out. Like you take, for instance, the all-seeing eye, the pyramid with the all-seeing eye. And, you can also make a hand symbol. You'll see a lot of it from athletes, from movie stars that are getting their one-eyed picture taken. So if you watch films, Hollywood's only been around about 100 years, give or take. You go and watch films, it's not until the early 1990s that you even start to see pyramids in some movies, and just a few. But now, it is hard to actually find movies that don't have that symbol stamped on it, which is essentially, that is the mystery religion's way of communicating that, there are messages in here for us, that we're showing our power, we are interspersed into all of your society. Of course, it's been on our dollar bill, not since 1913 when the banksters, the international bankers, took over the Federal Reserve. In fact, I'm curious, can you find out when that all-seeing eye popped up on the dollar bill?
Look it up.
Because I want to say it was after Kennedy was shot, but that's relatively recent. And
I'll find it.
they are, as you've probably all heard, hidden in plain sight. And if you take another random symbol, and I use a shamrock, for instance, because we all know what a four-leaf clover is, a shamrock kind of thing. If it were random, we should see as many four-leaf clovers stamped on a wall during a music video as we do a pyramid. But the reality is, this is anecdotal, and I'm off the cuff. I haven't actually researched this. But seeing as how I don't remember ever seeing a shamrock except for, who's the band that sings Jump Around? House of Pain, thank you. They're the only people I know that carry a shamrock in their logo or in their presentation. But the pyramid, I mean, it is ubiquitous. It's omnipresent. It is everywhere. And that is something that is relatively new. It's as if, what was hidden is now starting to come out into the light and starting to manifest itself. I mean, have you guys noticed more of it? Do you notice it now?
I notice it now, for sure.
That's why I asked the question, because I wonder if it's, am I noticing it more because I'm aware of what it means, or am I noticing it more because it's being used more? That's why I asked the question. I honestly don't know yet.
It's a great question because,
I'm very aware of it. I see it everywhere. Dave and I were having a conversation at dinner about, the positive and the negatives of waking up to these things. And it's kind of like, I can't look at anything. I mean, I see a chocolate chip cookie, and I'm skeptical now. It's like,
that looks like a pentagram on that cookie.
Are those pyramids or are those chocolate chips?
There's a goat head on that goldfish.
Exactly. Look, you know what? There's I think you can overreact to it. I certainly did for a while. But it's sort of like, if you buy a Volkswagen, all of a sudden you start noticing Volkswagens everywhere. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's kind of like that.
And I wondered that too. But that's why I went in and I literally, for the last 2-3 years, I do the Shamrock Pyramid thing in my head. I'm like, all right, I should see roughly the same amount of shamrocks as pyramids. But, unless there's other forces at work that this is not a scientific experiment. And I think it's right now I'm about, other than House of Pain, it's like 1,000 to 1.
Dude, I wish we would have had this conversation a few weeks ago, because I would have totally worked a shamrock into our logo. We could start our own revolution.
Shamrocks.
Dollar bill. According to Wikipedia, take that for what it is. The design seen today debuted in 1963, when it was first issued as a Federal Reserve note, previously being silver certificates.
The year Kennedy was killed, who is...
64, right?
He was killed in 63, November 22nd of 63. And, if you still think Oswald had something to do, something to do, he did. If you still think Oswald is the guy that made 3 shots and killed the president, turn this station off. You have no business listening to us, and go back to La La Land.
There's an episode of American Idol on in a few minutes.
Yeah, exactly. And then after that, Dancing with the Stars.
Oh, yeah.
So once you understand why Kennedy was killed, and there's no one, it's not over one particular reason, but one of the big reasons was he was out to, number one, replace that money supply. Back then, we were only 50 years into the Federal Reserve. So in 63...
Much easier to correct than where we're at now.
Oh, now it's impossible. They're just, nothing's impossible. And it's going to actually be corrected, because we've already read about how it's going to be corrected. But at that time, they're only 50 years into it. And keep in mind, we're about 50 years since the death of Kennedy, which seems like it was just kind of like yesterday almost. So he wanted to replace our reliance on this private organization, because the Federal Reserve is not federal. It's a private company. There are 300 different owners of it that are made up of about 13 bloodline families that have been in power going back to the days of, I think we can track them all the way back to the days of Babylon, but I've certainly tracked them back to the days of Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago. And these are the exact same people that the Bible talked about as the synagogue of Satan. These would be Satanists posing as Jews, which is what you have with the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and this whole anti-Zionist movement. This is exactly what they're talking about. They're posing as Jews, but they really are not. Their God is Lucifer. Their God is Satan. And we've mentioned lots of examples. My favorite is David Spangler, who headed up one of the divisions of the UN, who flat out just said no one's entering the New World Order without a pledge, making a Luciferian pledge. And they aren't kidding. That's in writing. We're going to actually talk about some of those quotes in a minute, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we're going back in time. We're going to get ourselves caught up to, so we went off on this tangent around the Tower of Babel.
To kind of tie it all together without getting into all the details we went through the last show, because we really I kind of jumped all over the place with all the different false gods that were there and how they were basically all very much the same thing. I think the connection to where we're going now, and you can find this in the encyclopedia, the Masonic Encyclopedia, the Encyclopedia of Freemasons. They list Nimrod as one of the founders of Freemasonry. So there's your connection to biblical times, to the times of the flood. And everyone knows who who the Freemasons are, or at least know that it is a thing. So that's kind of how it ties in their own words, actually.
Now, don't confuse that with the fact that in the days of Nimrod, there was a secret society called the Freemasons. Now, the Freemasons actually, I think, were founded by the Jesuits. And I don't have time to get into my notes too deeply here, but if I'm wrong, I will be correcting myself in a couple of minutes. And under the name of Freemasons, that name has been in operation probably since the 1700s. And it's their ideals that go back to the days of Nimrod. And when we say Freemasons, let's understand something. The vast, vast majority of Freemasons are good people that have no idea what they're involved in. And it's only when you get to the 30th, 31st, 32nd degree or the honorary 33rd degree do you really start to understand, with each degree you're given some more secrets of the world, and it's a little carrot being dangled in front of you. It all started off with an oath. You're making an oath to something that you don't even know yet, which I think is just crazy that anyone would do that. But, again, the love of money is the root of all evil. And if you do want to be a well-connected person in the society, being a Freemason's a great way to do it. You're going to be rubbing elbows with some of the top bankers in the world, top businessmen. And if I was a 25-year-old kid, knowing what I knew back then, I easily could have joined something like that, thinking this was going to be good for my career, not realizing that by the time I understood I had made an oath to Satan, Lucifer, it would be too late for me to get out. My life would have been revolved around. I mean, it's so much harder to break away from that as you get deeper into it. And at some point, you're killed if you try and get out.
And anything that good, why does it need to be a secret?
Well, exactly. I mean, God and Jesus have no secrets. They operate in plain sight. You know, why? Whenever you see anything secretive,
yeah, it's always the secretiveness that makes me skeptical of the real. What are their real intentions?
Exactly. You know, we've got.
I mean, it's never good when it's like, oh, don't tell your mother. You know,
right,
I mean,
right.
it's just. It's
I mean, it could be
good.
real good if you don't know what you're doing. I've got this ongoing debate with a listener who we agree on everything. I mean, some of the most crazy ideas that I won't even bother bringing up on this already quote-unquote conspiracy show.
Well, it's too crazy for this show?
Yes. I mean, not without a lot of foundation. I'm not even going to bring them up because it will just end up discrediting ourselves. So we have this ongoing debate about, we've had a few shows about what's in our skies. And by the time you're done listening to the generals, the presidents, the air traffic controllers, the military, the government contractors, the governors, I mean, there's obviously something up there, without a doubt. And just too many credible people are coming out and talking about it. If you wonder whether there's any teeth to that, I've said before, a good place to start is Stephen Greer and the Disclosure Project. It is general after general after admiral after general basically talking about, no, our military we're doing things with this. So this ongoing debate I have with this particular listener is we agree on everything, except she happens to believe that what's up in our skies is benevolent, as in good, beneficial, not malevolent, bad. And she's rolling the dice with them. She's putting her faith that the good, quote unquote, EBs, extra biological entities, ETs, aliens, whatever you want to call them, whatever's up there.
Why do we need a new term? I thought ETs worked well.
You know why? Because
it's EBE.
EBE, thank you. Because the word alien became a buzzword. The minute someone says something about aliens...
I'm cool with extraterrestrial. It evolved in the 70s with the ET. And
I like extraterrestrial because, first of all...
I mean, it gets so confusing. I don't know what to call anything because they're constantly updating the terminology.
Well, I just call them what I believe they are now. I mean,
well, you can't say that in front of everybody.
For 42 years...
Maybe that's what's wrong. That's what I'm doing wrong.
Yeah.
Why? What are you doing?
I just tell people what I think, and maybe that's why people go...
Well,
it is. It's like, okay, you've gone beyond... It's hard enough for people to accept the word alien, like there's something in our skies. But actually, statistically, we fired off a few statistics. 52% of the United States believes there's something in our skies. 56% of Germany, the civilized nations of the world, there are 24 nations that have publicly said, no, there is something in our sky. Even Super Bowl quarterback Aaron Rodgers came out just a few weeks ago. In fact, you can look that up, maybe fill in the story a little bit. He had an ET experience, and this is something that's very common and getting more common, and there are credible people coming out of all walks of life saying, I've actually I've seen them with my own eyes, and they're like manifesting themselves around the same time that the all-seeing eye came out, 50s, 60s, is when these, Roswell kicked it all off in 1947. So, hurdle number one is you've got to understand that there is something in our skies that we can't technically explain or it doesn't belong there.
The thing about aliens, just to go back to that for a second, I'm still trying to get all this stuff arranged in so I can talk with anybody about it, not just you guys. You guys are easy on me, But the couple things that come to mind with that are, first of all, until you laid on me your opinion of what aliens are. Okay, the kind of stuff that DiBiase just spouts in like Walmart, you know. And,
Attention, Walmart shoppers.
Like, by the way, you do know that.
Do you know how many people I say that to, and they're like, "Oh my gosh,
And
that makes
the thing.
total sense."
That's the thing is, I refuse to believe that there was intelligent life from another planet. Okay, I was leading a completely secular lifestyle, and then I start to see some of the signs through everything, and it's like, but I don't get the tie-in with aliens. I don't get it. And you're like, dude, they're demons, and it's like, oh, okay, you know. So it's like, I completely refuse to believe that there's intelligent life from another planet visiting here, because that doesn't make sense to me. But you tell me they're demons, and I'm like, okay, cool. What's the next conspiracy?
Yeah, they were definitely predicted. They're going to use a big fancy show in the sky, and for me, it didn't hit home because in this whole process, in fact, I became a quote unquote conspiracy theorist through 9/11. And I actually took a few breaks because I was finding things that were so far from what we were taught. Like, I was almost a little kind of crazy and paranoid. So one day I decided to look up the mother of all conspiracy theories, and that is the alien thing, looking up into, what NASA has talked about, the radio communications that have been intercepted by ham radio operators where NASA astronauts are talking to Houston, and it's obvious that they are in their communications acknowledging that there is something, there's something else up there. And so, that one I literally thought I was nuts for a while. But the point is that I believe they were actually aliens from another planet. And I don't discount that there could be life in other parts of the universe. That's very possible in my mind. But according to NASA insiders, and yes, by the way, you can look this up. You'll never hear it on the mainstream news, and Anderson Cooper will never tell you this. He's too busy talking about diet shows and showing us cat videos. But you can actually find dozens of NASA defectors. And with that, take it with a grain of salt, because I don't trust anything NASA says. The defector themselves could be nothing more than another deception mechanism, so keep that in mind. But these guys have documented 17 different species of quote-unquote aliens that are interfacing with our planet today. And there's, if you read the Bible and understand what's happening, there's going to be this war between, we're going to get sucked into it, where the good aliens are going to be battling the bad ones. Hegelian dialectic. I got it in there, Howard. And,
Did you get that on the list, Ken?
The good ones are going to win, and then we're all going to become part of some freaking federation of planets or whatever. I've actually seen the documents that this is the plan. And
I just want to meet Captain Kirk. I'm a big fan of his work.
Exactly. And where I was going with that. Oh, my point is if these aliens are benevolent, this is my ongoing argument with this listener. Why are they operating in secret?
Exactly.
Why are they?
Because it
why
can't
are they
be
hidden?
good if it's secret. And if they've got all this technology where they can travel all over the place, why would they come here? We're boring.
Why would they need to cut a deal with Eisenhower at the Greada Treaty, 1951, where we swapped their technology for their ability to literally abduct people from all over the world, but certainly the United States? Now, it doesn't seem like much, because if you look at statistics, about 3% of the population, 2 or 3%, depending on who we're talking to, claim to have been abducted.
That's quite a big number.
What is 2% of 300 million? That's 6 million people.
Yeah, that's a lot of people.
6 to 9 million claims of abduction. And let me tell you something. There aren't 6 or 9 million abduction books out there. And when you start talking about this, you don't get more popular. You don't make friends, and you don't make money. You get fired. You get made fun of. You get your credibility's lost. You lose your friends. There is no glory in discussing this. And it's only just some very just tenacious researchers that have gone in, because where these if you have an abduction experience, who do you call? Who would you call?
I'd call you.
Well, who would a regular Joe somewhere in the U.S. call?
Well, they can call here. We can give them the number.
They call 911. They call their local police precinct. And it's only by adding up all of the claims at every local police precinct in the United States do we arrive at this number of 6 to 9 million. There's no like national agency on abductions. No one's like, quote unquote, organizing this information. And when you start to see that, like, and these people they don't want to be known. Like, they're like, something just happened here. And
well, there's got to be a large percentage as well of people who aren't calling. Because, I mean, if that happened and there's nothing you can do about it, who are you going to call?
You can actually go find testimonies of people that are happy to be working with these, EBEs, whatever they are.
Well, yeah.
And, there was a point I wanted to make about that. The ETs, my point was this. If these guys are so advanced technology-wise, why do they need to abduct anybody? I mean, why are they abducting humans? What are they doing? They're impregnating them. In fact, if you've ever seen like the cows that get slaughtered in pastures, have you ever seen that? Yeah. We've discovered that some of them actually have human embryos growing in them, and they like act as a incubator for a certain amount of time, and then the cow's killed, and they take, like, there's literally a race being spawned or grown around us, which is going to be used in this the biggest false flag in human history, which the book of Revelation and Daniel and Isaiah and Ezekiel, many books actually discuss it. They don't use word alien and they don't use flying saucer, okay? But if you understand what you're reading, and with a little help, I think, from the Holy Spirit, this stuff gets, I don't know, for me anyway, it feels relatively clear, and the footprints of this coming attack are all over the place, and it's probably going to happen.
Well, what's
soon.
excuse me? What's the warning that is offered? However, is don't be deceived.
Right.
Don't be deceived. So there's also another part of that there will be something so great that it will deceive even the elect if possible. Now, but to define what that means, the elect are people absolutely chosen by God himself. If these people can be deceived, it must be something so grand in scale that it would be almost impossible to convince yourself that it's not real.
If we synthesize technology that's available today, now we also saw that face morphing technology video.
Dude, it's so creepy I laughed.
And it just doesn't even affect me. It's like, well, why wouldn't they have that? I never thought of that.
What was the name of that?
What the technology's called, I don't know.
I think if you YouTube it, if it's still there, it's like face-to-face RGB video or something like this. If you YouTube that, you'll find it, and it's the creepiest thing that I've seen in a while.
What this technology is. Now, we already know voice morphing technology exists. That's existed since before 9/11.
Yeah, 99.
Yeah. So this face morphing technology, what happens is you have a static picture of, say, George Bush, President Bush, and it's static. It's not moving. It's just essentially it's like a photograph of him. Or he could be, in an interview or whatever. There is a camera pointed at a, what's the word I'm looking for here? At another person. And if that's the target video, and if that target person, let's say, raises an eyebrow or makes an O face or smiles or does something with his eyebrows, you see O face, exactly. I gave her my O face.
Sorry.
You can actually see George Bush doing it, and he's not really doing it. It's a target off screen.
It's CGI, basically.
Dude, you cannot
It's CGI on the move.
On steroids, dude. You can't tell it's fake.
So now, so you understand, we've got voice morphing technology. We've got face morphing technology. We've also got audio morphing. So, in fact, we tested this on an Iranian ship, and you might have to help me with the details. It was also on a movie billboard that was out a few years back. And what would happen is there would be an audio signal sent specifically. So, Dave, if you were walking by this billboard, it would sound as if someone was whispering in your ear, saying, this was a harmless message along the lines of, hey, you need to come see this movie. We also did it to some Iranian Navy men a few years back, literally drove these guys insane because we were whispering a message to each individual sailor on their ship, and they thought that, God was talking to them. Then you add in what Project Blue Book and Bluebeam have been doing. I mean, one of the reasons we're launching rockets into space continually is I think we're building one of the greatest holographic display, something along those lines, that you put all those together and literally, I think there's going to be a day where they're going to be able to impersonate or fake the second coming of Jesus Christ. Someone's going to be whispering in your ear, I'm Jesus. You're going to see this thing in the sky it's going to be so massive it'll be seen by millions. And this might be on the heels of this, outer, quote-unquote, outer worldly invasion. And I mean, if you are not completely couched in the Bible, how the hell would you how will you escape that? You're going to buy. There's no way you don't buy in.
That's the power behind it, I think, is that it would be, it's something of such a scale that, and talking about the holographic thing, that there's kind of like the soft disclosure going on right now, and I found some of this by accident, but you can YouTube something else. Just YouTube floating cities in China, and there's cell phone footage, and this isn't like they come out and explain it away that it's this really weird optical illusion, but when you watch the footage, it's really a city floating in the sky. I mean, it's not like a mirage where you see like a camel that's, reflecting itself in the air. I mean, it's like above in the clouds. It is the creepiest thing. And then they've seen it in Africa, and the claims are the same, that it appears, and it's like New York City up in the sky above. It's on YouTube. It's all over the place. You can see the footage. So it's almost like they're trying it out here and there.
Oh yeah, they test,
kind of developing it.
Test.
They've already done this with holograms of people in real live events.
No, Prince Charles. Remember, we were trying to figure out who Prince Charles. Remember, we couldn't remember his name like a few months back.
Yeah.
He appeared to a crowd. They thought he was there, but it was actually only a hologram
That's
image.
right.
Mariah Carey just did a concert where she appeared in 5 venues at the exact same time.
Michael Jackson went on tour last summer.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. He's still alive. No, I don't know. I'm just making that up.
If you put all these things together, and with this, you have to look that up. Just see us explaining or describing it doesn't do it justice. That clip, I think it was out of Stanford University, right? With this university students are playing with this technology. When you actually see it for yourself, you'll just be like, if you just kind of think about it for a minute, what you could do with this, right? I mean, you literally could have any given individual giving a speech in every single country at the same time saying something different.
Right. You made the point you could so easily incite a war.
It would be, and then offer, explanations and this, and then with all this other... you would have to, the only way you could ever look at all of it when it manifests like that and be like, there's no way that's real.
Well,
would be to be grounded.
The people in charge of that are also known as the military-industrial complex, which is what Eisenhower himself, in his farewell speech, said, you guys got to watch out for this thing. Now, a president can't go up and say, watch out for the devil. He's real. He'll call it the military-industrial complex. Kennedy will call it, we are faced around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy. He was really one of the first public conspiracy theorists. Now, what do you think he was talking about? Communism? Really? They travel by night. If you listen to that speech, which many believe was also one of the speeches that got him killed, he did another speech 10 days before his death where he flat out said, look, the office of the president has been used to enslave the American people, and I've got to do whatever I can to warn them about it. But you got to understand, the president is surrounded by his own enemies. Always. I mean, what is the Secret Service? Yes. And what is, secret, protect the president. What's their other job? Protect the money supply. Think about that. So who do they really work for? And I think even if a president ever wanted to come out and, just say the truth, so it makes me wonder about Trump. Like, how much does he know about what he's really getting into? Because I don't think he's part of the quote-unquote system, but he could be. It's just hard to tell.
What, anymore, I don't even I don't even pay attention to that stuff anymore. I don't trust any of it.
So let's bring this back. Kenny, we're going to have a break in like 5 minutes or so. Does that sound about right? All right. Can you bring in about 5 minutes, can you get us from Tower of Babel and just some of the basics of the mystery religions where we were a few weeks back, get us up to about 0 AD, roughly. Feeling the pressure?
Yeah,
Dave's
that's
eyes
fine.
just went wide like,
That's
holy
fine.
cow.
Yeah, learn Spanish and then do this. Okay.
Dave, when we last were talking about the history, the origin of the mystery religions, which started in in ancient Babylon. And one thing you'll find in the book of Daniel, there were 4 great demonic satanic kingdoms that were predicted back then, which Babylonians first, followed by the Greeks, followed by Rome 1, and then this mystery called Rome 2, which, we tend to, that's the one that we're under now. And it is basically those same mystery religions that went underground after Jesus was crucified. It's as if they changed their plan and they stopped ruling overtly, like the Aztecs and Incas, the Egyptians certainly were an example of where ritual death sacrifice.
Assyrians, Persians, Greeks, Romans.
Managing through fear. We're talking about the great kingdoms, not the only ones. And, today we do it in the form of perhaps some people argue that abortion today is our form of, ritual murder of children the same way that these ancient civilizations did it. And if you look at the power structure of the world today, let's get through the Greeks up to the Romans, and then we'll discuss how the Romans became the popes, which then filtered out into the kings and queens of Europe. Now we've got, what the beast with 10 horns or 7 horns, and the 10 horns represent 10 countries, which is the European Union today, all going to be most likely led by the Roman Catholic Church. And we're going to get into that about how much power it's truly being wielded through that organization, unbeknownst to most of the planet.
That's juicy stuff right there.
So,
you might want to tell Mom to tune out.
Oh, she's still, she's listening. But, when you've gone for 80-plus years and it's the only thing you've known and heard and you trust, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's like someone coming up and saying, hey, your wife's having an affair with your best friend. I mean, you just deny it at first. You just, unless you see overwhelming evidence, you don't just believe it right off the bat, unless she's a chronic liar. But this is essentially, it is the spiritual war that began. I mean, that is written about, the first prophecy in the Bible was God talking to Satan, Adam, and Eve, and he basically says to Satan, your seed, not human seed, but your seed, meaning that he's going to have some sort of genetic connection to some people on Earth. How? I don't know exactly, but I do know that we are doing a lot of stuff with genetic engineering, which that's messing with, God's programming code. And, of course, we just talked about some of the, I don't know what they are, human hybrid, whatever you want to call it, that are happening in these abductions and in these slaughtered cows and yada. So, it wouldn't be a stretch to think that that's possibly where these things are coming from. And you certainly have, what we call today the Illuminati or the New World Order. I mean, they have a lot of names. These guys outwardly now do praise Lucifer. I mean, they are coming out in public and saying it in droves in their books. And again, you won't see this on CNN because CNN is controlled by these same guys. It is not. They're not completely public yet, but it's like they're starting to move the curtain a little bit so you can see behind what's really at work in the world. Anything else you wanted to comment on that?
It's a big subject, right? There's a lot of when you talk about mystery religions and all of these ancient societies or kingdoms, you want to call them. The one thing you'll find, and what you have to kind of get your head wrapped around, is although all their deities and everything all have different names, and they're actually all of the same thing.
Yeah, like Zeus is Zeus to the Greeks,
Jupiter
is Jupiter to the Romans.
It all ties back to fallen angels and Satan himself, and that's where all this stuff comes from. And what you're seeing when we're talking about like the whole alien thing is actually these things manifesting themselves, coming from 4D right to 3D, to where we can see them.
Yeah, we've got one of those deities, Shiva, the god of destruction,
That's
which
right.
is sitting right at CERN, and then another Large Hadron Collider has the Shiva tunnel system. That's what they called it. How odd! And what is the god that they have at Rockefeller Center? You guys know offhand?
That I don't know.
I believe it's Atlas. And there's
Okay,
a
and
picture
that's-
of Atlas, and there again another one of these fallen angel / gods. Because I always wondered, why would God put a commandment in the Bible saying, "You shall have no other gods before me"? I mean, who else could there have been? I didn't really understand what the fallen angels were, but he already knew that a lot of humanity was going to be praising these guys directly or indirectly. And certainly we do it through the occult, through witchcraft, through theosophist societies. And
these things were here pre-flood, which is key because they were already here. And actually one of the big reasons for the flood was because of their existence here and what they did when they came here. Which is
they were corrupting all of God's creation.
Well, they were breeding with women.
And they were messing with the DNA profiles of animals as well. I mean, and that's
Yeah.
one of the reasons. It almost seems like the tipping point for God. Tower of Babel, he doesn't destroy the world. He just confuses the languages. But the flood, and think about this. Some people peg the population of the world at the time of the flood in the billions. And 8 of them, only 8 out of billions survived.
We're not contaminated genetically.
And that was what Noah's main calling card was, is he was clean in his generations. He was spotless in his generations.
Right.
His DNA was still complete. It had not been contaminated through, people having sex with each other that shouldn't be. Not just people, but something that is more than just human. And there were a couple of rebellions in heaven, which I do question that sometimes. Like, how did that happen? Like, if God's perfect, how was there even one rebellion in heaven, which was Satan and then a third of the angels? That was rebellion 1. The second rebellion were the 200 watcher angels, these hyper-powerful angels that were supposed to be watching over humanity. They're the ones that got induced with, getting it on with human women. We've been talking about this historical spiritual war, which really, these are not just geographic locations, but Israel versus Babylon. It's also the ideals behind them. And this has been going on since the beginning of time and is more alive today than ever. But because we're so mesmerized by mainstream media and that television set in most of our living rooms, most people are just frankly completely unaware of the armies that are forming around us as we speak. And they're, when God predicted that what is coming upon the earth is going to be so scary, it's going to make men's hearts stop. I get it.
Yeah.
Like, if you are not, and Stephen Quayle, I recommend anyone look him up, Quayle. He is someone that fully grasps what we're talking about. You can Google him or YouTube him, and he's been talking about this for quite some time. And he makes a point, which is, if you are not mentally prepared for this, like, you have no chance. And I don't want to be a fear monger, but I agree with him. Like, if you don't understand what's going to be happening, how are you gonna survive?
Yeah, he does a really good job of actually illustrating that. I think I listened to, because he does like an online radio show, right? Is that online based?
So, I mean, he's on so many radio stations. Like, I want to get him on our show, but
yeah, because I've listened to something like that, and the way he explains that is just like what you said. And when you hear him say it, because I've heard that exact same thing, and it's true. If you can get your head wrapped around how big this really is going to be, then that totally sends it home to where how would you survive it?
Well, ultimately, the whole plan is to get us to accept a mark, which, again, the Bible talks about. And I don't know whether that's going to be an injection, a tattoo, an RFID chip. I do suspect it's going to be something that changes our DNA in some way, because once you accept it, you are excluded permanently from ever getting to heaven. Now, why would that? It doesn't make sense that would be over just a mental choice. I think something, for the same reason God wiped out the world with the flood, there's got to be a corruption of his creation.
That's interesting you say that, because doesn't it say something, I can't quote it, about receiving the mark will cause you to break out in sores or something like this? I remember reading something like that.
Well, there are vial judgments, the 7 vials, and they very much mimic what we saw happen in Egypt as the Jews were doing their exodus out, where there was famine, there was disease, there was darkness. That's something, though, you might want to look up right now.
Yeah, I just remember, and that's just interesting. You tied it with DNA, because that would make sense. If it's altering your DNA, well, that's going to be a problem, right?
Well, it disqualifies you, apparently, and that's what this whole thing is about. And in that choice where we're accepting this thing or not, we're either pledging allegiance to the Antichrist, which is probably going to... Now, we all saw The Omen, and so we think the Antichrist is going to be this, like, evil guy with a pitchfork. And no, dude, he's going to be like Superman. He's going to be handsome, well-spoken, loved, and the vast majority of the world is going to be in. This guy saved us from the extraterrestrial, quote-unquote, invasion. They're going to love him because he brought peace and security back to the world. And all we have to do to enter this new, I call it the Federation of Planets because I'm a Star Trek fan. Who knows what the heck it's going to be called, but it's going to be, this is going to be how we unite the world. And Satan's plan has been to put the world under a single world government where we praise him. Today we call it the New World Order, which is manifesting itself everywhere. Even presidents are talking about, not just the famous Bush speeches, but every president of every nation around the world is discussing this coming New World Order. It's just becoming a fact of life, and we're just being softly prepped for it.
Yeah, you're seeing people on stage wearing T-shirts that say "Global Citizen," and this kind of, it's becoming almost,
yeah, and the message
stylish, right?
And you don't understand how this could possibly be evil, but the message of unity, which you now see everywhere, like one love, one, that actually can be used in a very dangerous way against us because
the way they're using it is in order to be unified, We have to accept everybody else's flaws, discrepancies.
Well, we're going to be
There's no standard.
We're going to be unified with the evil element of this world.
Right.
And once we are unified with that, we're effed. I mean,
right.
just,
And through this unification, they're making us accept things that we would not normally accept. But it's under the guise of, it'll be a better world if we're all unified. So, hey, it's okay. Go against all the things in the Bible. Let's just throw morality out the window. It's okay. You feel like
But
a
it'll
refrigerator,
actually-
you must be a refrigerator.
it'll look as if we are following the Bible.
Yeah.
See, I was thinking of a metaphor for this. And imagine this big prison yard. You've got hundreds of prisoners in there, and it's surrounded by a circular wall. And there's literally 1,000 exits out of this prison. But 999 of those exits, lead to death. Only one exit is the true exit out of this prison. And these exits have all sorts of different flavors, and many of them are dressed up to look like the good exit, the safe exit. I mean, they mimic it almost exactly, but there'll be one little thing that's off. And then there'll be another exit where it mimics almost everything else, but there'll be one little thing that's off. And if the devil, which I do believe he's very real, the devil does not care which of those 999 you take, because all of them lead to him. There's only one way off this rock, really. And unless you choose the right exit, you're fried. You're game up. Your soul. I mean, this is what we're talking about. This is bigger than any job you have or bigger than anything that's here on earth. We're talking about eternity. And as long as you don't choose the right one, he doesn't give a care which one you end up choosing. And of course, a lot of them are going to be dressed up to look like the right exit, the good one. And that's why unless you are couched in these timeless words, the odds of you choosing the right exit they're really small, especially with where our society is today. It's been in the last 100 years that we've gone from an agrarian society where we were taught about the ancient world and God and Jesus from our own parents who were taught from their parents. It wasn't until the J.P. Morgans of the world took over our education system in 1905, and then they passed the women's lib movement, which meant now you got mother and father out working in the world, earning tax dollars for those banksters. And so who's really raising our kids? Public school system. Well, that was actually created by this evil cabal. And the history they teach us is a false history.
Yeah, quite clearly.
Now, it's not even close. The important information is left out, and we're not taught how to think. We're taught what to think. We use that example of, who discovered America?
Right. Yeah. Well.
Columbus did, but of course there were already people here. So how did he discover it?
Yeah, and no one questions that. Right?
And then the quote unquote the smarter sheep guy was like, oh no, well it wasn't Columbus, it was Amerigo Vespucci. Okay, just because he can throw out a name that, but at the end of the day, those are both wrong. I mean, neither one of the. First of all, America, I don't think we know when it was discovered because populations have been here that seem to have some sort of Asiatic origin, long before Columbus.
Yeah, it goes back to the Phoenicians.
Yeah, we were mining for copper,
right?
Even here in the state of Michigan, 7,000 years ago. We found Phoenician ships and the leftovers of part of the Greek Empire that were, this is only going back now 4,000 years, that were here in the Midwest United States. So we found evidence of the exact same copper profile in metal that's in the Middle East that can only be found in this continent.
Right.
So don't tell me Columbus, discovered the free world. But what you get is people that just regurgitate it. That's what they say. That's what the question is on the test.
It's on the calendar, man. Come on.
For the kids who discovered America. Oh, it was Columbus.
Yeah.
Oh, you get an
That's
A.
a 5092.
They don't teach you how to think. They teach you what to think. Big difference. And who is exalted in our society? It's the people that are the best at what to think. They're the ones that make good grades and get into the college colleges where you're actually, and I can tell you this from experience, you're further indoctrinated. Again, it's such a nasty system, and it's hard to understand, especially when it's like trying to see the forest when all you can see is a tree. And
speaking of college for a second, I was reading I read an article, and I just find this interesting, just to prove your point as well, that kids who are brought up in a Christian environment, kids who go to church from the time they're born, whose parents are involved in the church, they grow up in the church. Okay, not necessarily kids like we came up. Okay, or at least like me and Dave.
Not like I came up either.
Yeah, but I'm talking the kids that are active and involved in the church from the time they are born. That when they go away to college, over 70% of those kids leave the church.
I've seen it happen. I've seen it actually happen. Where,
yeah, and
so you're going to tell me that college isn't designed to separate you from your parents?
Look, college, they actually will omit evidence against evolution because they're actually more about protecting the theory of evolution than they are about discovering the truth. And I don't know how many scientists have literally converted to Christianity that were either biologists, archaeologists, genetic engineers, those types of fields of study, because as they get into it, they realize, wait a minute, there's no way. Yeah, we believed in evolution because the simple cell is what Darwin said mutated itself. But that cell is not simple. Inside that cell is a DNA code made up of 4 proteins. And if even one protein is out of order anywhere, the whole, nothing mutated works well. We've used the example, it's a computer code. What happens to Windows when you remove one line of code? Is it going to work better? Or if you throw in a few extra lines of, Babel, is it going to turn into a better software program?
Tell them you're fruitful, I think.
Oh, evolution is a pet peeve thing of mine. And I love making people uncomfortable with this.
And I used to believe evolution my whole life. Until
it's hammered into your head.
I never bought evolution. It just never
a
made
lot of
sense
people,
to me.
A lot of people I talk to say the same thing. They just like, dude, I just never quite.
I never cared. It didn't matter to me. But I never bought
care,
it.
but I found myself arguing for evolution.
No,
I didn't even know. I'm arguing for.
Dude, it's simple.
What's
why
the fruit fly?
are there still monkeys?
Well,
it's
I was
just
in
that simple.
I was in that boat. I was in that boat too, where I just kind of bought it, whatever. But it's become a real problem for me, like a pet peeve thing. And the greatest thing, and you can look this up. It's really a thing. So what they did is the fruit flies have a very short lifespan, right? Like 11 days. So they decided to go ahead and start doing experiments with fruit flies because they can literally go through generations of them.
Sure.
In a short amount of time. This started, I think, back in the 50s or 60s, maybe a little bit before that, but around that time. Oddly enough, around the time of television. But anyway, they started, introducing different outward stimuli on the fruit flies to try to get them to evolve. They literally thought, they could make these things grow flippers
it's
or
every
crab
11
claws.
days. So you got 50 generations roughly in a year. Let's say 35 generations in a year, 50 years. So there's 1,500 generations of fruit flies in.
11 million generations.
Okay, because they're
at 11. Check it out. This is what I love about these guys, and I make a living with science, and I love these guys because you think children have good imaginations. These guys take the cake. Here you go, where you got 11 million generations now, more generations than anything else because they don't live very long, right? So it's just weird that after all these generations of doing everything to these things, imagine that. It's still a fruit fly. So what was the conclusion that they've come up with? Is like, I guess fruit flies are immune to evolution. I mean, comedians can't come up with stuff better than that.
One of the best examples I saw is someone showed, I think it was the roof of the Sistine Chapel or something like some beautiful painting. And basically, the guy that was making this point said, you basically have to believe that 2 rocks accidentally came together in a way with some rain, and over time were able to come up with humanity that was able to paint that. So, the Sistine Chapel ultimately came from a couple of rocks. Like, they had to organize themselves.
Yeah, it obviously takes more faith to believe that it actually is real than what it is that we're talking about.
That's what's funny. I mean, and the Bible says we're going to believe this false religion. And it really, that's what, it is a religion.
Yeah, it absolutely is.
And I found myself arguing for evolution because that's what my college taught, University of Michigan. But at the end of the day, when I actually went and looked at the science for myself, my jaw was on the floor. I'm like, this is impossible. Darwin himself said we should find, by the way, not one missing link. We should have found thousands of missing links. You don't just, we all see that little picture where we go from ape to Neanderthal to eventually there's a man walking.
It's nonsense.
You've got to actually have thousands of creatures, i.e. mutations, in between each one of those images.
Right.
And we should be finding fossil remains of these things all over the place. We haven't found a single one.
No, and the latest is what, Lucy? That was the one that's, I think, the most recent missing, quote-unquote, missing link they found, right? Which in my eyes, from what I can tell, and I'm no, not a biologist or anything like that, but it common sense would tell you that all that pile of bones proves is that a monkey died in Africa. That's really all it proves. In fact, it doesn't really matter.
When I went looking for it, I ended up finding not one or two. I'm talking probably hundreds, but certainly well into the dozens of archaeologists that were uncovering tombs, not just even one bone, but entire tribes of giant skeletons buried together. And these things were, in some cases, 20, 30, 40 feet long, which that blows evolution right out of the water. And that was one of those things that I had heard about in the Bible, before I started reading it, where, because in the book of Genesis, they talk about how giants roamed the earth. And I'm like, really? There were giants here? I'm sure Anderson Cooper would have told us about the giants if they were here. But then you come to find out that all these archaeologists, all these digs have the exact same story behind them, which is, what do? They call the Smithsonian or the museum. And within a few hours, the military is there. They kick out all of the researchers. They cordon off the area. They take the evidence and take all the work possible from the archaeologists. So all that's left are a few personal photographs and just his story. And here again, if you spend your whole life being an archaeologist, are you going to blow your whole career trying to make up some story of giants being buried? You can go to the New York Times microfiche articles. Go back to the 1800s. There's article after article after article about giant bones being discovered. I mean, not just like some Yao Ming type of tall guy. And I'm not talking about the type of giant where you're actually physically weak. These are the kinds of giants that are, oh my God, I got to show you guys this video. Oh, darn, too bad we're on a radio show. Point is, there's a lot more truth to what's written in that.
Well, and really kind of that same thing is, what we're talking about here is what would be the motivation to hide it? So what if we found giants? What's the big deal?
Well, because it proves the Bible's true.
That's
and
exactly
it disproves
right.
evolution.
That's
look, there's
exactly
only
right.
Well, evolution's goal is to disprove that there's a God.
Now that is the esoteric goal. Yes, that's the hidden goal. Now that's not what you'll read in textbooks. This is more the evolution of science. We're getting smarter, although
textbooks say the Civil War was about slavery.
That's yeah.
All right, so if there were giants, you can't have evolution.
Yeah, and really Darwinism as it's in itself, if you want to go.
And Darwin was a 33rd degree Freemason.
And also not a scientist. I found this really interesting, is he actually had a degree in theology, which is very odd to me.
Huh.
He wasn't even a scientist. So again, he was part of the inevitable deception. These things traverse generations, right? This isn't like a one lifetime plan thing where some guy comes up with this evil idea. This started,
he was
long time ago, right?
He was working for somebody, someone that's timeless.
A piece of the puzzle, and it really is a perfect springboard to this alien thing we're talking about, because
Well-
it jumps right into it, because the whole panspermia ideas that are out there, the whole ancient alien theory that's out there. Darwinism is a perfect springboard for all the above.
So one thing to understand is the giants were the offspring
The
of
the
the Nephilim.
That's
Yeah.
right.
They were the offspring of the connection between these fallen angels and these human women, and they were messing with DNA enough to the point where they were able to create these.
Was it all angels, or was it just the Watchers that actually laid down with human women?
No,
That's
it was fallen. The fallen.
That's a
angels
good
did that.
question. You mean that was it the angels of the first rebellion or the
yeah,
second
that's
or
what
both?
I'm kind of wondering.
That's a good question. And I suspect it's probably both, because those 200 Watcher angels were locked up in chains for 70 generations, which if the flood was about 3,000 BC, 70 generations at 70 years a pop, that's 4,900 years. Well, that puts us at 1900 AD when these guys would have been left out or let out. But there's also a passage that some of those they're going to be locked up in chains up until Judgment Day. So it possibly was other angels. So this overt rule of the demonic forces of the world, Jesus Christ shows up, he gives everyone a way off this rock, and all of a sudden their plan changes to go hidden. And if you look at the Council of Nicaea, if you look at the books that were omitted from the Bible, basically everything that talked about fallen angels, the book of Jasher, the book of Enoch, the book of giants, those are the books that were omitted. It's almost like Satan's plan B, because he tried to tempt Jesus Christ. And he was in a position 2,000 years ago to offer up the whole world.
Yeah.
And I doubt he lost grasp of it. Even the Bible says this is his world. So he has to come up with plan B. And plan B is going to take a while to get going, but here we are in the last stages of it, where these same hybrid, i.e. Nephilim creatures, because it was predicted they would be back.
Right.
And we're seeing evidence of it everywhere. I don't know if they're necessarily going to show up as giants again. They
Well,
might.
keep in mind, our DNA is weaker than it was before, too. So the giant thing might be over with, because it's not possible anymore from a genetic perspective because of entropy, right? We get worse as time goes on. It's actually the opposite of the theory of evolution.
Well,
so
basic law of thermodynamics, things break
Yeah,
down,
it's-
law of entropy.
right. So our DNA is weaker, so the whole Nephilim thing can still be going on. There might actually be, there's people that theorize that there is actually an active breeding program going on, which leads into the whole black-eyed kids thing and all these kind of, weird kind of happenings. And they're not manifesting as giants anymore because the DNA for it's just not there.
Yeah, how many people, defectors out of our Department of Defense, and Phil Schneider's a guy I think everyone should look up. And there's tons of Phil Schneiders where these guys come out and they're like, look, man, I am telling you, there are races of these like reptilian, I don't know what the hell they are, but they're intelligent. They literally have weapons. They're underground, and they are at every military base. The military bases he saw. In fact, he had been accidentally lowered into an area. They broke through a roof, and I want to say this was Dulce Base, DULCE, and he was on a cart with 2 or 3 other guys. They broke through the roof and all of a sudden found themselves face to face with the tall reptilians, assuming they're real. I've never seen one myself,
Right,
so
yeah, me too.
I'm not going to go out here and say, oh, they're for sure real. But he claims to have gotten into a gun battle with them, and these guys are they're delicate like we are. They can be killed. They have superior technology, because if the technology they have is the technology that has been around since the Tower of Babel, think how many thousands of years ahead, technology-wise, they are. I mean, they're going to, if they want to, if they've kept that advanced technology hidden from us, which thousands of people inside our military and even civilians, Department of Defense contractors are coming out and saying these things, this advanced technology is real, that what we have on our periodic table of charts even is just like you could go so much further. We have materials that'll just pass through each other right now, but we don't. That's not taught in our science books because we are shielded from the most important information because that ignorance is going to be used against us. That is humanity at some point. So, so we're way off on a tangent here.
Yeah,
'cause
we always do that.
We were going to talk about the shadow government and how it came to be. So I'm going to take what we were talking about, days of Jesus Christ. Demonic plan changes. They begin to go underground. This is what the Rome 2 thing is, which is a sort of a secret kingdom where the demonic powers of the world are not overtly ruling anymore. They've gone underground. And this is when secret societies start to pop up everywhere. And immediately, Rome was never conquered. The Romans ruled the world, and they were never conquered. Where the heck did they go? Well, they just morphed into the Vatican. In fact, a Roman Caesar, Constantine, became a pope. And since then, it's why all the European royalty, including our own presidents, are linked by too few degrees of separation by blood to all the kings of Europe and also the popes that are in power even today. They're from a similar, if not the same, bloodline. And again, this was predicted that this secret that the devil would he'd go underground for a long time, and even up through the 1600s, the spiritual war is manifesting itself where these new, Christian powers are trying to eradicate the world of people practicing witchcraft. We had the Salem witch trials here. We had the Inquisition. And it was around then that Satan began to be characterized as humorous. And if you go back and look at cartoons that came out in the 1700s, 1800s, he goes from being this real entity to fear to being a mythical entity that is sort of like a joke. He's now got a tail with a little, thing on the end of it. He's carrying a pitchfork around, and he's sitting on your right shoulder, yapping in your ear, saying, do fun stuff. Go, don't worry about this or that. And so these guys, it was part of his strategy to go quiet. So along the way, the holders of this information, the illuminated ones, which that's what Lucifer is. He's Luce, meaning light, was illuminated one. He was God's light bearer. He was the bearer of light, which I take to mean God is so bright that someone needed to actually shield even his own angels away from it. We look into the sun; it's so bright we can't do it. It hurts. It's beyond our visual capabilities. And he obviously, this esoteric hidden knowledge which has existed all throughout history has been buried in these secret societies. And so the Knights Templars, they were the holders of this information. Now, these guys were founded in the 1100s. So this is now about 600 years, 700 years beyond Constantine. The Romans have now become the popes. The Roman Caesars, that is, have become the popes. And this secret information was carried throughout history by many different organizations. We've known them under many names. Dave, you talked about their origins being in Babylon, went through the Greeks, through the Romans, the Knights Templars from the 1100s until Jacques de Molay. He was the last head of the Templars. In fact, in a coordinated attack by Pope Clement V. This was Friday the 13th, 1307. He had all of the Templars arrested. Now, that is the reason today that Friday the 13th is considered bad luck, and all of these guys were put on trial and were condemned to death. There, the Knights Templar at the time, the image that they praised was a Baphomet, which we now clearly once again associate with demons, demonic powers. And you've got, the Baphomet image. He's got one hand pointing to the sky, one hand pointing below, as is above, as is below, because they're coming out. It's like they're coming out into the public domain again. But there were 60-plus Templars that were arrested on Friday the 13th, all condemned to death. And de Molay was essentially the last Templar. The banner of their organization may have died, but the information didn't die. The movement behind it did not die. It ultimately morphed into the Jesuits.
Yeah.
That's the modern day. Like, there are some people that will. Walter Wyeth is a guy I think everyone should look up. Last name is Veith. He gave a series of lectures talking about literally the day-to-day history from about 0 AD, when Jesus Christ is calling these guys the synagogue of Satan, to where they are today. And we know them as the quote-unquote, the Illuminati or the New World Order, the evil banksters. But these guys report, like the Rothschilds, who we think might be like they're the head central banking family, or they're the ones most associated with the central banks of the world. They would actually, according to his research, they report to the head of the Jesuits, which is also called the Black Pope. And this guy is considered by many to be the most powerful human being on the planet, like the true ruler of the world.
Yeah, the Jesuits that's an interesting organization. That,
you did a little research.
I have some stuff on the screen here that I thought that it actually was. It got so bad for the countries in Europe that they were actually suppressed. Right, they were actually dissolved by the Pope himself. They got so dangerous. But Pope Pius VII restored them in 1814, and this actually comes over into the U.S. So we can go through all like the European stuff, but people don't relate to that here really. So when you talk about people like John Adams or Thomas Jefferson or Abraham Lincoln, then these things kind of ring in your ear if you're interested, if you're curious, right? So there's some interesting quotes. I mean, John Adams, he wrote, it was actually a letter to Jefferson, I believe. John Adams, second president of the U.S., he writes that my history of the Jesuits is not eloquently written, but it is supported by unquestionable authorities, and is very particular and very horrible. Their restoration in 1814 by Pope Pius VII is indeed a step toward darkness, cruelty, despotism, and death. I do not like the appearance of the Jesuits. If ever there was a body of men who merited eternal damnation on earth and in hell, it is the Society of Ignatius de Loyola, which is the Jesuits. Loyola was the guy who formed the Jesuits, right? And that goes into Samuel Morse talked about them at length.
As in Morse code?
As in Morse code, yeah,
Okay.
Samuel B. Morse. I only have one. He actually writes a diatribe about them, but one sentence out of it is the Jesuits are a secret society, a sort of Masonic order, with super added features of revolting odiousness and 1,000 times more dangerous. It's a pretty big statement.
Yeah, I mean, their founding principle, like their inner doctrine, was to bring the church under one roof again. Because just prior to their founding, this is when Martin Luther put up his 95-point edict. And basically what Martin Luther, he was a Roman Catholic for most of his life, and then he starts seeing that actually the Roman Catholic Church is so far away from what the Bible teaches. He's like, literally, these guys are like quasi-demonic. He begins the Reformation, the Protestant Reformation. The Jesuits were an answer to that because their goal, to this day, very active, and they're much closer to doing this than people realize, was to ultimately reunify, again, one world order, new world order, under one heading. In fact, head of the Jesuits currently is a guy named Adolfo Nicolas, and he's the 13th superior general, which people call the Black Pope. These guys started with St. Ignatius, the Jesuits did, in 1534. Ignatius Loyola had 6 of his students that began this group. By 1540, the Vatican had recognized them. In fact, do you know how the Vatican Pope has IHS written on his vestments? According to insiders, that actually stands for Isis, Horus, and Set, which is, again, the counterfeit Trinity, and that was the Egyptian Trinity. And these guys, the Jesuits, are the ones that introduced the all-seeing eye, the pyramid with the all-seeing eye. It was the Jesuits themselves. And from there, we're now in the 1500s, 1600s. You can't boil history down into 2 hours and put all these pieces together. But descendants of theirs are something that came to be known as the Order, which was established at Yale in 1833, again at our best educational institutions. That today is known as Skull and Bones, where some of our presidents have come from. The equivalent group was set up at Oxford University, but they're called the Group. In fact, Mein Kampf, which many people attribute to Hitler, was actually written by a guy named Father Bernhard Stampfel, who was a Jesuit.
Yeah.
And also a Jesuit was Heinrich Himmler, the head of Nazi Germany's SS. In fact, there again, the skull and cross, the skull, you've seen the lapel pin that he carried. And what happened to the Nazis? Well, the Germany lost the war, but the Nazis didn't. What did the Nazis do? They went, they became essentially the communists in Russia, and they also came over to the United States and became our CIA, which then Eisenhower starts to say, hey, the military-industrial complex, these guys are evil, look out for them. Kennedy speaks out against him. He's gunned down. That's the first modern-day conspiracy. And these guys have been here all throughout history. In fact, John Adams, you said, here's something else, also in a letter he wrote to Jefferson in 1787. Now remember, the banking powers, this is where all the power comes from, is the ability to print money. And if you understand how much power is inherent in that, you can do anything. He said this: all the perplexities, confusion, and distress in America rise not from defects in our Constitution or Confederation, not from want of honor or virtue, so much as from downright ignorance of the nature of coin, credit, and circulation. And that's because most people just don't understand what it meant to the U.S. for us to be able to print our own money. Now, back then, we were printing our own money, but those banking powers, which were hyper-powerful, were already at work. In fact, I think it was Abraham Lincoln who said, I've got 2 big enemies. In fact, let me see if I can find his quote. But his was along the lines of, I've got the Confederate armies of the South. Abraham Lincoln. He also, major enemy to the banking cabal. And again, another president that was assassinated. Always assassinated by these 3 named assassins. Lee Harvey Oswald, John Wilkes Booth.
Well, don't all killers have 3 names? Serial killers. Everybody's got 3 names.
What's Ted Bundy's middle name?
Well, he didn't kill a president, so.
Yeah, if you kill
got you on that one.
So,
one serial killer.
A lot of people believe that Lincoln was assassinated because of his defiance against these bankers. So now this was taken from a letter on November 21st, 1864 to William Elkin, and this was about the printing of our money. Lincoln would be assassinated 5 months after this. So in this letter he wrote, I have 2 great enemies, the Southern Army in front of me and the financial institutions in the rear. Of the 2, the one in the rear is the greatest enemy. He knew. Of course, the Rothschilds themselves, generations of them have been quoted as saying things like, here's what Nathan Rothschild said in 1820, the man who controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the British money supply. His dad said, in 1800, permit me to issue and control the money of a nation, and I care not who makes her laws. That's certainly true today, and you see our Constitution being ripped apart,
Shredded.
by senators and congressmen who are, what are they doing? They're answering to the people that got them elected because they paid the money to do it. And that is why ultimately you can get these quotes from these bankers, because as a former CEO of a few businesses, I can tell you that control the money and you control people's lives. And if you're a bad person, you don't want to be with that guy. If you're a good guy, then great. Here's something Thomas Jefferson said in 1798. If the American people ever allow the banks to control issuance of their currency, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks and corporations that grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until the children will wake up homeless on the continent their fathers occupied. That's literally happening today. And if you're one of those folks that think this whole Illuminati thing is some mythical movie character to be, kind of shrugged at, this was what George Washington said in a book called The Writings of George Washington, which was published in 1941. This is on volume 20, page 518. He writes, "It is not my intention to doubt that the doctrine of the Illuminati and the principles of Jacobinism had not spread in the United States." So even by the late 1700s, this was already starting to weave into our society. He goes on to say, on the contrary, no one is more satisfied of this fact that they are here than I am. You can follow this. The leaders of our world have been screaming out against this very organization that Jesus Christ called the synagogue of Satan. Today we know them as these evil banksters. Let's look at another president. Let's go with James Garfield. Same story. Whoever so controls the volume of money in any country is absolute master of all industry and commerce. Teddy Roosevelt in 1913 said, "Behind the ostensible government sits enthroned an invisible government, owing no allegiance and acknowledging no responsibility to the people." Woodrow Wilson would go on to say, another president, "What is important is to dwell upon the increasing evidence of the existence of a secret conspiracy throughout the world for the destruction of organized government and the letting loose of evil." How much time do we have, Kenny? 0? 1 minute? 0. All right. We will pick this story up later. The folks we're talking about are very real, very dangerous. My suggestion is turn off your TV sets for a little while. Do some research. What's at stake could be greater than anything you could imagine. Anything Howard, Dave, Kenny, you guys want to say before we call it a night?
I look forward to picking it up next week.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, we'll pick this up next week.
Our new time slot, new day.
Thursdays, 6 to 8 p.m. Down the rabbit hole. You guys, unless you have any parting words, we're going to say good night.